Hey everyone, this is Pallavi and today I'm going to show the 17th game of the book Chess: The Art of Logical Thinking by Neil MacDonald. This game was played between Kramnik and Svidler in Linares in 1998. The opening played was Catalan opening. From this game, we will learn the complexity of chess and how a combination of strategic and tactical understanding can lead to a successful game. So without further ado, let's start. White started with knight f3. Since the square typically turns out to be the most favorable choice for the knight, it's highly logical to position it there right away. Knight f6. Black answers with the same developmental move, whether their strategy is to opt for a classical approach by centralizing their pawns or launch a counterattack with moves like g6, bishop g7. The knight will be effectively positioned to bolster their chosen strategy. c4. White begins the fight for the d5 square, e6, and black at once opposes him. g3. With active development through bishop c4 or bishop b5 no longer possible due to the pawn on c4, Kramnik opts to move his bishop to g2, aiming it at the center. Now black played d5. Black occupies the center with his pawns rather than trying to control things from a distance with his pieces after b6, bishop g2, bishop b7. Now white played d4. White won't allow his opponent a free hand in the center. Note that he isn't offering a pawn sacrifice, as after d takes c4, he can easily regain his pawn most simply by queen a4 check and then queen takes c4. So now black played bishop e7, developing the bishop safely and comfortably into a successful gap in his pawn structure. Now white played bishop to g2. Whereas a knight needs to be securely placed right in the center to be at maximum efficiency, a bishop is often happy overseeing things from a distance. Castle. Black has developed sensibly and quickly. Already his king is removed from the airy center and placed behind a wall of pawns. Short castle. White follows suit. It would make no sense trying to castle queenside and then throwing pawns at the black king, as the bishop on g2 is pointing the wrong way for a kingside. D takes c4. Things look good for black except for the challenge how to find a suitable role for the bishop on c8 without creating other issues. If only the bishops on c1 and c8 could vanish magically, black's position would be equal. Unfortunately, in chess, results are determined by logic and strategy, not magic. Consequently, Svidler starts a plan to active his bishop, but it comes at a cost, dismantling the d5 barrier, which gives white's pieces, especially the bishop on g2, more freedom. Now white played queen c2. White is on the path to recovering the lost pawn. If black plays b5, then a4 will split up black's pawns. Now if c6 is attempted, then a takes b5, c takes b5, and then ng5 would spell trouble, as it's impossible to stop q takes h7 mate after knight d5. So let's say black playing knight d5, then stopping the bishop from capturing the rook, then queen takes h7 checkmate. So after queen c2, black played a6. In contrast, black doesn't intend to keep the pawn but seeks to utilize white's time, recapturing it to position the bishop on b7 for a strong presence on an open diagonal. After a6, now white played queen takes c4. White regains his pawn, at the same time clears the way for action along the c file. b5. Though not visually appealing, this move exposes vulnerabilities on c6 and c5, lacking pawn protection. But it advances black's plan and gains time. Queen c2. The queen chooses a square where she both maintains a pressure along the c file and has influence on the e4 square. Bishop b7. So black has solved the problem of how to activate his queen's bishop. This is a great positional achievement, as many games have been lost due to the bishop sitting idly on c8. Bishop f4. However, Kramnik hasn't made any mistakes, so white's initial advantage remains. This advantage has shifted from having a better queen's bishop to having a superior pawn structure. White can now target the vulnerable pawn on c7, which can't receive support from another pawn unless white's position deteriorates significantly. More likely, black will try to escape by placing the pawn to c5, exchanging his weak pawn for white's strong pawn on d4. If this exchange happens without white gaining a significant advantage elsewhere, black would quickly equalize. Therefore, the focus now is on black's attempt to get rid of the weak pawn and white's efforts to prevent this. Black is already dealing with the threat of bishop takes c7 with the support of the queen. Okay, so now black played knight d5. It was also possible to activate the queenside pieces with the knight c6, knight c6, then knight c3, and then knight takes knight to b4. But Svidler wants to eliminate white's bishop, so black played knight to d5, knight c3. A good developing move with a direct threat. Knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and bishop takes c7, gaining a pawn. Now black played knight takes f4. The only consistent move is after knight takes c3, then queen takes c3. Black has clearly lost time. He has made 3 moves with his knight to capture an enemy knight that has only moved once. So black played knight takes f4. White captured. Who benefits the most from the exchange on f4? Let's evaluate the factors. For black, he has managed the immediate threat on c7. He has swapped a knight for a bishop, generally considered a favorable exchange. He has somewhat compromised the white king side here. Now for white, he has gained valuable time for development while black was arranging the exchange. His control of the center, especially e5, is reinforced by the pawn's shift from g3 to f4. With the dark squared bishop exchanged, he can position pawns on dark squares without concerns about blocking it. As we will observe in the game, Kramnik effectively leverages the advantages from the exchange more than Svidler. Now black played knight d7. Black's queen's knight finally gets developed. If black succeeds in playing c5, they can attain equality and possibly more thanks to their bishop pair. Now white played a good move. Rook f d1. The rook on the d file stops c5. So what happens if c5 right now, which would be problematic for black after d takes c5. The knight cannot capture because it's pinned by the rook. So bishop takes c5. Now either knight e5 or knight g5. Threatening mate on h7 would cost black a piece. This is good for white. So after rook f d1, now black played bishop takes f3. Instead, bishop takes f3. If black had played queen c8, sidesteps a potential trouble on the d file and defends b7, this would rule out any tricky discovered attacks on either the queen or bishop. Play could go like this: knight e4, c5, d takes c5, knight takes c5, and then knight takes knight, queen takes c5, bishop takes c5, rook a c1. Black has liquidated his weak pawn and almost equalized, though he still has to tread carefully as white's rooks are very active, but still it was playable. So black played bishop takes f3 in the game, and then white played bishop takes f3. Black has surrendered the bishop pair in the expectation that it will make c5 easier. However, as Kramnik illustrates, with his king's bishop unopposed, he can effectively control the light squares. Now Black's rook is under attack, so black played rook b8. The rook needs to save itself, but this move to b8 is quite lackluster, highlighting some issues with the coordination of black pieces. White played another good move, e3. In contrast, white's pawn structure complements the light squared bishop effectively. All the central pawns are on dark squares, and the bishop commands all the available open lines. Knight f6. By putting the knight on f6, Svidler concedes that he won't be able to force through c7 to c5 in the near future. If black had played c5 right away, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, and then knight e4. Now the bishop is under attack. So if the bishop goes to b6, then queen c6 wins the knight. If the bishop goes to e7, then also queen c6. If queen e7 supporting the c5 bishop, then rook takes knight on d7, queen takes d7, and then knight takes c5. So white gains a piece. So black played knight f6. Now white played rook a c1. White's position is harmonious while with well placed rooks, while the black rooks face issues. The f8 rook is passive and the other one is idle, fixated on the b5 pawn. Now black played queen d6, supporting the c5 square. Of course, right now c5 would be a mistake because of d takes c5 uncovers an attack on the black queen and stays a pawn up. So after queen d6, white played another good move, which is knight e2. It is absolutely essential to stop black getting rid of the backward pawn with c5. Rook fc8. The battle over the c5 square continues. On it, the outcome of the game will be decided. Black is ready to advance c5 again with complete equality. Now how can white keep up with the pressure? Another good move, e4. White seizes the opportunity to employ his central pawns given that his pieces are optimally positioned. In contrast, the black rooks are clustered on the queen side and lack the capacity to counter a central push. Queen d7. The queen has to retreat in the face of the fork, e5 winning a piece. White played another good move, d5, a crucial move that forces the black knight out of the center and clears the d file for white's pieces. If instead e5 were played immediately, the knight would find a strong central square with knight d5 effectively blocking the lines. So white played d5 and then black captured the pawn. Black had to capture the advancing central pawn. Now white played another good move, e5. Brilliant. The black knight is now forced to a less effective spot on e8 where it stays for the game. However, playing e takes d5 instead of playing e5 would be a big mistake for white. It would divide these white pawns, making them less mobile, and the white pieces would lose control of the d file, especially the critical d5 square. Plus the black knight wouldn't need to retreat. So black had to play knight e8, rook takes d5. White recovers the pawn with dominance on the light squares. Queen h3. Black's sole active piece is the queen, so Svidler employs the queen to initiate a counterattack on the slightly vulnerable white king side created by white's advances in the center. Svidler, known for his tactical skills, creates some intriguing counterplay. However, one piece alone cannot do everything. Bishop g2 saves the bishop and attacks the queen. Queen h4. Black hopes to get the chance to play c5 when the backward pawns vanishes, and with the weak square on c6 and the white knight is deprived on d4. Apparently the white knight cannot move from e2 as the f4 pawn is attacked, but white played knight d4. Keeping a strong grip on the bright squares is more crucial than keeping the f4 pawn. Black captured. Queen takes f4. Now if c5 instead, then knight f5 gains a piece. So black played queen takes f4. Now white played knight c6. White's success with the light squares, the knight occupies a fantastic square. The attacking both a rook and the bishop, controlling d8, thus thwarting black's rook action on the d file and obstructing black's attempt to free the position with c5. This explains black's eagerness to displace the knight even if it means sacrificing a rook. Now black played bishop h4, threatening to win a pawn by bishop takes f2 check, because if queen takes f2, then queen takes c1 check. So now white played another good move, rook cd1. No rush to grab material with knight takes b8. Kramnik avoids the trap and gets ready to move his rook to d4 to trouble the black queen. The black queen is in a tough spot because her support from other pieces is lacking. Now black played rook b6. Black fights to survive, but white's better coordinated pieces are too much. Just look at the inactive rook on c8 and the knight on e8 with nowhere safe to go to cy. So now white played rook 5 d4. After this simple move, the black queen has no good retreat square. Now black captured, rook takes c6. If instead queen g5, then queen e4 unexpectedly traps the bishop on h4. If instead queen h6, then queen f5 attacking the rook, rook a8, knight e7 check, bishop captures knight, and then bishop captures rook on a8. Black is not only the exchange down but threatened with queen d7 winning a piece. So after rook 5 d4, black captured, rook takes c6. White captured with the bishop, the correct way to recapture, as after queen takes c6, then bishop takes f2 check, attacking the king and the rook, king h1 and bishop takes the rook. If instead rook takes f4, then rook takes c2, rook takes h4 and then rook takes b2, things have gone entirely wrong for white right now. So that's why white captured, bishop takes c6, queen takes e5. If queen g5 check, then king h1 leaves black the exchange down for a pawn with a wretched position, but it appears that the game move is a good fighting chance, as if after queen takes e5, if rook takes h4, then queen g5 check regains the exchange and leaves white fighting for a draw. So after queen takes e5, white played another good move, bishop d7. In this game, Kramnik showcases both strategic expertise and tactical precision. He secures time to capture the bishop on h4 by attacking the black rook. Okay, so after bishop d7, black played rook d8. Black's last hope is that If white plays bishop takes e8, then rook takes d4, it's winning for black. So after rook to d8, now white played rook takes h4 and white wins. Black resigned because if now queen g5 check, then rook g4 with the support of the bishop. So this was the game. Now let's look at some principles, some key principles learned from the game. Piece activity. Develop and place your pieces effectively. Center control. Focus on controlling the center with your pawns and pieces. Piece exchanges. Evaluate exchanges wisely. Pawn structure. Be aware of how pawn structure affects the game. Coordination. Coordinate your pieces for a stronger position. Tactics. Recognize and utilize tactical opportunities. Endgame technique. Efficiently convert material advantages. King safety. Keep your king safe. Planning. Develop and adapt your plans. Patience. Don't rush. Choose moves that enhance your position. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from this game as well. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel to show some support. Thank you. See you in the next video. Bye bye.